The evening sky was turning golden, and the air was quiet. A man walked slowly along a dusty path that cut through the edge of a deserted village. His name was Daniel. He was not searching for anything special that day. He only wanted a little peace after working hard since morning. The path was silent. The houses looked old. The wind carried the dry smell of sand and wood. Daniel's boots pressed against the ground, leaving small prints in the dust. He had taken this way many times before, but something felt different today. The silence was heavier. Even the birds were not singing. He stopped for a moment, looking around. His heart beat a little faster. Sometimes silence hides secrets, and Daniel felt that truth pressing against him now. As he walked forward, he noticed movement near one of the broken huts. At first, he thought it was just the shadow of a branch moving in the wind. But then he saw it again, a small figure. Daniel narrowed his eyes, trying to see clearly through the dust in the air. His steps slowed. His mind whispered warnings. In empty places, meeting strangers is not always safe. Then the figure stepped into the light. It was not a shadow. It was a child. She was a little girl, no more than 7 years old, standing barefoot on the dry ground. Her clothes were torn, her hair messy, and her eyes wide with fear. She looked lost, and her tiny hands shook as if she was cold, even though the air was warm. Her ears were pointed, not like Daniel's. Strange lines glowed faintly across her skin, like marks of light under her flesh. Daniel froze. This was no ordinary girl. For a long moment, they stared at each other. The child did not move closer. She simply watched him, as if waiting to see if he was safe. Daniel's heart softened. He could see fear in her eyes, but also hope. She was too young to survive alone out here. He took a slow step toward her, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly, though he knew she might not understand his words. His voice was calm, gentle, like a father speaking to a scared child. The girl stepped back slightly, her bare feet leaving prints in the sand. Her lips trembled, and for a moment it looked like she would run. But something in Daniel's eyes held her still. She tilted her head, as if listening to the kindness in his tone rather than the meaning of the words. Daniel knelt down, making himself smaller so she would not feel threatened. "You're safe," he whispered. He pulled out a small piece of bread he had carried in his pocket. Slowly, he set it on the ground between them. The girl looked at the bread, then at him. Hunger flashed in her eyes. Her small fingers moved nervously. After a long pause, she bent down, picked up the bread, and nibbled it quickly. Daniel smiled. The first wall of fear was broken. As she ate, Daniel noticed the faint glow on her skin growing brighter. It was not dangerous, only strange. It made her look almost otherworldly, like a star wrapped in human form. He realized she was not just lost, she was different. She did not belong to his world. "Where is your family?" Daniel asked, even though he knew she could not reply in his language. The girl lowered her head, as if ashamed. A tear slid down her cheek. Daniel felt a sharp pain in his chest. He knew that look. It was the look of someone alone, someone abandoned suddenly. A sound broke the moment. A rustle, faint but sharp, came from the shadows behind the hut. Daniel's head turned quickly. His instincts told him they were not alone. His eyes searched the dark space, but nothing moved. Still, his body stayed tense. He could feel its eyes, watching, hidden in the distance. He looked back at the girl. Her face had turned pale, and she was holding the bread close to her chest like it was treasure. She knew someone was there too. Her small hand reached toward Daniel, fingers trembling. Daniel took her hand gently, his large hand wrapping around her tiny one. He stood, pulling her closer. "Don't worry," he whispered. His voice was steady, though his own heart was beating faster. The girl pressed against his side, trusting him. That one touch spoke louder than any words. She had chosen him, a stranger, to protect her. The path ahead was long and uncertain. Daniel did not know who was watching or what dangers waited in the shadows. But he knew one thing. He could not leave this child alone. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with fire. The first stars began to appear. Daniel tightened his grip. On the girl's hand, he did not know her name, her story, or why fate had placed her before him. But deep inside, he felt the start of something greater. What he did not know was that this meeting would change everything: his life, his future, and even his heart. The night was slowly covering the land. The last light of the sun faded, and the wind grew colder. Daniel walked with the little girl by his side. Her small hand held onto his tightly, as if she was afraid he would disappear. He could feel her tiny fingers trembling, but she did not let go. That grip was weak, but it carried a message. She trusted him. Daniel knew the choice before him. He could leave her here, walk away, and forget he ever saw her. It would be the safer thing to do. But deep inside, he knew he could never do that. He had seen fear in her eyes, and he had seen hunger on her face. Walking away now would mean leaving her to the darkness. And Daniel was not the kind of man to abandon a child. He knelt down to her level again. "You will be safe," he whispered. His voice was soft, and though she could not understand his words, his tone was like a promise. The girl's eyes searched his face, looking for signs of truth. Finally, she gave a small nod, as if her heart believed him more than her mind could. Daniel stood and looked around. The village was old, half destroyed, and empty. The wooden huts leaned to the side like tired bones. The air smelled of dust and smoke, as if fire had once eaten this place. He wondered how long she had been here. Had her family left her? Was something darker hiding in the silence? The girl pulled his sleeve, pointing to her mouth. Hunger still gnawed at her. Daniel reached into his bag and gave her the last piece of dried meat he carried. She ate it quickly, her face softening with relief. A small smile flickered on her lips. Daniel's chest warmed at the sight. They began to walk again. Daniel guided her carefully, watching the shadows with sharp eyes. Every sound seemed louder. Now the creak of old wood, the whisper of wind through the broken walls. He could not shake the feeling that someone was following them. But if danger was near, he was ready to face it. As they moved, Daniel tried to speak gently, even if she did not understand. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl tilted her head, confused. He touched his chest and said, "Daniel." Then he pointed at her, raising his eyebrows. She blinked, then whispered a word so soft he almost missed it. "Lyra." Daniel repeated it slowly. Lyra. Her eyes lit up. She nodded quickly, a smile forming despite her fear. For the first time, Daniel saw her as more than just a lost child. She was Lyra's little soul with a story hidden in her silence. They walked until they reached the edge of the ruined houses. Beyond the broken walls lay open desert, the sand glowing faintly under the rising moon. Daniel stopped, unsure of which way to go. Lyra tugged his hand and pointed toward a faint path leading east. "Is that your home?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her face remained uncertain, as if she was not sure her home would still be there. Daniel took a deep breath. "Then we go east." They stepped into the desert. The night air was sharp, carrying whispers across the dunes. Each step crunched softly in the sand. The stars above looked like silver fire, shining brighter than Daniel had ever seen. It felt as though the universe was watching them. As they walked, Daniel noticed something strange. The faint glowing marks on Lyra's skin pulsed softly, like gentle waves of light. At first, he thought it was a trick of the moon, but the glow grew brighter whenever she squeezed his hand. It was not frightening, which was beautiful, like living. "Starlight, who are you, Lyra?" Daniel whispered under his breath. She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering like pools of light. For a moment, he felt he was not holding the hand of a simple child, but of something greater. Something touched by mystery. Suddenly, a low growl broke the silence. Daniel froze. The sound came from behind them. He turned quickly, scanning the darkness. His heart raced. Shadows moved across the broken huts. Something was following them. "Stay close," he told Lyra, pulling her behind him. His hand reached for the small blade at his belt. He could barely see the shapes in the dark, but he felt their presence. Watching, waiting, the growl came again. Closer this time. Lyra's grip on his hand tightened painfully. She pressed against him, trembling. Her skin glowed brighter now, almost like a shield of light. Then, silence. The shapes faded back into the shadows, as if afraid of her glow. Daniel did not relax. He knew they were still there, hiding, waiting for the right moment. He lifted Lyra into his arms and began walking faster. His legs burned from the weight. But he did not stop. Every step carried a single thought. Protect her. Whatever hunted them could wait. His choice was already made. Lyra rested her head against his shoulder, her glow faint but steady. Daniel felt her trust sinking deeper into him. For the first time, he realized this was more than just a rescue. This was destiny pulling him onto a path he had never imagined, as the desert stretched before them and the stars guided their way. Daniel whispered again, "You are safe, Lyra. I promise." But deep inside, he wondered safe from what? And how long could he keep that promise? Before the shadows returned. The desert was silent, but Daniel could feel danger breathing around him. Every few steps, he turned his head, scanning the darkness behind them. The shadows moved like living things, twisting with the wind, and he knew they were not alone. Lyra clung tightly to his hand. Her small body shook, and her glowing skin flickered brighter whenever she felt afraid. Daniel could see her pointed ears twitching as if she could hear things he could not. She was listening to something hidden in the night. Daniel's heart pounded. He was not a soldier, not a hero, but his instincts told him to protect the child, no matter what. He tightened his grip on the knife at his belt, ready for anything. The night air felt heavy, pressing down on his shoulders. They kept walking, following the faint path across the dunes. The moonlight painted the sand silver, but the ruined huts behind them disappeared into the darkness. For a moment, Daniel thought maybe the danger had stayed behind. Maybe the growls he heard were just his imagination. Then he saw it. 2 eyes. Glowing faintly red, watching from the edge of the dunes. Daniel froze. His breath caught in his chest. The eyes did not blink. They stayed fixed on him and Lyra. Slowly, another pair of eyes appeared beside the first, then another. And another within. Moments, 5 sets of red eyes glowed in the dark. Daniel's hand tightened around the knife. His mind screamed to run, but his feet stayed rooted to the sand. Lyra pressed against his side, her light glowing brighter now. She was terrified, but she did not cry. Instead, she held his arm tightly, as if knowing he was the only thing standing. Between her and the darkness, the eyes moved closer, shifting silently across the sand. Daniel's body tensed. He could hear their claws scratching the ground, soft but sharp. Whatever they were hunting. "Stay behind me, Daniel," whispered to Lyra. She nodded quickly, hiding against his back. Her little hands clutched the fabric of his shirt, her glow wrapping faintly around him like a shield. The first creature stepped into the moonlight. It was tall, hunched, with long arms that almost touched the ground. Its skin was rough, gray, and covered in scars. Its mouth opened to reveal sharp teeth that glistened in the light. Daniel's chest tightened. This was no animal. This was a predator. The creature hissed, and the sound echoed across the dunes. The other stepped forward, forming a half circle around Daniel and Lyra. He counted 6 of them now, their eyes glowing like fire. Daniel's mind raced. He could not fight 6 monsters with a small blade. He had no shield, no weapon strong enough. But running was impossible too. They were surrounded. Then something happened. Lyra's skin glowed brighter than before. The light pulsed from her body like waves, spreading across the sand. The creatures stopped. They hissed again, stepping back slightly, as if the light burned their eyes. Daniel glanced down at her. She was trembling, her eyes wide, but the glow came naturally, as if her fear itself had become a weapon. "Good girl," Daniel whispered. He placed one hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "Don't stop." The creatures circled, growling, but none dared to come closer. Their red eyes narrowed in the light, and their claws dug into the sand with frustration. Minutes passed. Daniel's muscles ached from standing so still, his knife ready, but he dared not move. The creatures seemed to be waiting, testing his patience. Finally, the leader hissed one last time and stepped back into the darkness. One by one, the others followed, their red eyes vanishing like embers fading in the wind. Daniel let out a long breath. His legs shook with relief. He had expected death, but somehow they were alive. He knelt down and looked at Lyra. Her glow dimmed slowly, fading back into faint lines on her skin. She looked exhausted, but safe. Daniel brushed her hair gently. From her face, "You saved us," he said softly. She tilted her head, not understanding the words, but she smiled faintly. He knew now that Lyra was not just a lost child. She was something more, something special. Those creatures feared her. Light? And maybe that light was the reason she had been left alone in the ruined village. Daniel stood again, scanning the dunes. The night was quiet once more, but he knew the creatures could return. He could not stop now. He had to keep moving, carrying Lyra in his arms. He pushed forward across the sand. Each step was heavy, but his resolve grew stronger. He no longer walked just to help a lost child. He walked because fate had chosen him to protect her as they moved. The stars above burned brighter, like guardians watching their path. Daniel wondered what world Lyra truly came from and why she had been left here. But one thought repeated in his mind, steady and unshakable. If shadows were watching them, then he would watch the shadows. He would not let anything take her away. And deep in his chest, Daniel felt something new, the weight of responsibility. And the beginning of a bond that could never be broken. The long walk through the desert felt endless. The night wind was sharp, cutting against Daniel's skin. He carried Lyra in his arms most of the way, her small body resting against his chest. She was tired, but she did not cry. Her soft glow had faded, but it was still there, like the faint light of stars hidden by clouds. Daniel's steps were heavy, but he did not stop. He kept his eyes fixed on the faint trail that led east, the one Lyra had pointed to. He believed her. Somehow, her small hand had guided him better than any map could. After hours of silence, the ground began to change. The smooth sand gave way to patches of stone and broken paths. Old wooden fences leaned against the wind. In the distance, Daniel saw the faint outline of houses. His heart lifted. This was not another ruin. It was a village. Lyra stirred in his arms, her tired eyes opened, and when she saw the village, her lips curved into a weak but hopeful smile. She pointed forward with a trembling hand, whispering something in her language. Daniel did not understand the word, but he understood the feeling. Home, as they stepped closer, Daniel saw figures moving between the houses. The village was alive. Lanterns flickered on the doorsteps, casting warm light against the night. People glanced at him as he entered, their eyes curious, their faces wary. A stranger walking into their home with a glowing child in his arms was not something they saw every day. Lyra suddenly wriggled, trying to climb down. Daniel bent and set her gently on the ground. She wobbled on her feet, but then she ran forward, her little voice breaking into a cry. From one of the houses, a woman burst out. She was tall and graceful, her long hair flowing behind her. Her face carried both beauty and weariness, but when her eyes fell on Lyra, everything else faded. Her cry pierced the air as she ran, arms wide open. Lyra. Daniel froze as the woman dropped to her knees, pulling the child into her arms. Tears streamed down her face as she kissed Lyra's cheeks, her forehead, her hands holding her as if she would never let go again. Lyra clung tightly to her mother, glowing faintly brighter in her embrace. For a moment, Daniel could only watch. It was a sight both painful and beautiful, the reunion of a mother and child, torn apart by fear. His chest tightened as he thought of all the times he had seen loss in the world. But here, for once, there was joy. The woman looked up at him then, her eyes shining with tears. She spoke quickly in her language, words Daniel could not understand, but the tone was clear. Gratitude, deep, overwhelming gratitude. She placed her hand over her heart, then bowed her head slightly. Daniel shifted awkwardly, not sure how to respond. He raised a hand in a small wave, trying to show it was nothing. Though inside, he knew it had been everything. The villagers gathered around, whispering to one another. Some bowed their heads to him. Others stared at Lyra's glow with wide eyes. Daniel realized her gift was not a secret here. They all knew what she was. And maybe they all knew the dangers that had been chasing her. The woman stood and approached. Daniel, still holding Lyra close. Her eyes searched his face with an intensity that made him shift uneasily. She spoke again, slowly this time, pointing to Lyra, then to him. He shook his head, trying to explain he was just a traveler. Nothing more. But she only smiled through her tears, as if she saw more in him than he saw in himself. That night, the villagers offered him a place to rest. They gave him food and water, things he had not tasted in days. Lyra refused to leave his side, even when her mother tried to take her inside. The little girl held onto his arm, her glowing skin pressing against him like a silent promise. Daniel sat by the fire outside, the stars above, bright and endless. He watched Lyra and her mother together, laughing softly, their bond strong even after the time apart. His heart softened at the sight. He told himself he was only passing through, that his duty was done. But deep inside, a strange warmth grew. As the fire crackled, he felt eyes on him again. Not from the shadows this time, but from the woman. She was watching him closely, her gaze steady, almost searching. It was not the look of fear or suspicion. It was something else. Something deeper. Daniel looked away quickly, unsure of the feeling rising inside him. He had only meant to help a lost child. Yet somehow, he had stepped into something far greater than he understood. The village was quiet now, but Daniel knew. His journey was not finished. He had returned the girl to her mother. That should have been the end. But as he watched them together, he could not shake the feeling that fate was not done with him yet, and he was right. The morning sun rose gently over the village, painting the wooden huts in shades of gold. Daniel woke with the sound of children laughing outside and the smell of firewood burning. For a moment, he almost forgot where he was. Then he saw Lyra, standing at the doorway, her bright eyes fixed on him, her glow faint in the morning light. She ran to him, smiling as if she had known him forever. Daniel bent down, and she threw her small arms around his neck. He lifted her easily, feeling the warmth of her trust. Her laughter filled the air, soft but powerful. The villagers were already awake, moving about with baskets, tools, and water jars. They glanced at Daniel curiously, whispering among themselves. He could feel their stares, but they were not cold. They were watching him with respect, as though he had done something extraordinary. Then her mother appeared. She carried a wooden bowl filled with food and a cup of clear water. Her long hair glowed in the sun, and her face was calm, though her eyes carried emotions too deep for words. She walked toward Daniel and set the bowl before him. Daniel nodded in thanks, though he knew she could not understand his words. He ate. Slowly, the warm bread soft in his hands, the water easing his dry throat. Lyra sat beside him, nibbling from his food, even though she had her own. Her mother watched the two of them quietly, her lips pressed into a faint smile. When he finished, Daniel stood to return the bowl. The woman touched her chest and bowed again, repeating the gesture of gratitude she had shown the night before. But this time, she did not walk away. Instead, she sat down across from him. Her eyes searched his face, steady and thoughtful. She spoke softly in her language, words flowing like music, though Daniel could not catch their meaning. She pointed to Lyra, then to her own heart, and finally to Daniel. Her expression was serious, almost pleading. Daniel shook his head gently. "I only helped," he said, keeping his voice calm. Anyone would have done the same. But he knew that was not true. He had seen enough of the world to know not everyone would risk their life for a child. The woman seemed to understand his tone, even without knowing his words. She reached across the space between them and touched his arm lightly. The touch was brief, but it carried warmth. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, Daniel saw something in them beyond gratitude. Admiration. The day passed slowly. Daniel helped the villagers gather wood and carry water. Though he was a stranger, they welcomed his strength. Everywhere he went, Lyra followed, skipping beside him, her glow flashing whenever she laughed. The other children watched her carefully, as if her light made her different, yet none dared tease her while Daniel stood near. That night, a small feast was held. The villagers gathered around a fire, sharing food and music. Daniel sat with Lyra on his lap, her head resting against his chest. Her mother sat close, her eyes often drifting to him when she thought he was not looking. When the fire burned low and most people left, she remained. Daniel rose to leave, but she stopped him with a word. He turned, meeting her gaze. Slowly, she stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, filled with emotion. She pointed to Lyra, then to herself, then to him once more. The same motion she had done before, but this time, her voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes shining in the firelight. Daniel frowned, trying to understand. Then it struck him. She was not only thanking him, she was asking him something deeper. He shook his head in disbelief. "No, you don't mean." But the look in her eyes told him everything. The mother was not just grateful. She wanted him to stay. She wanted him to be more than a savior. She wanted him to be part of their lives. Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at Lyra, sleeping peacefully in his arms, then back at the woman. The air grew heavy with silence, the fire crackling softly between them. He did not know what to say. His heart raced, caught between shock and something he did not want to name. The woman placed her hand over her heart again, then stepped closer. Her other hand reached for his, resting lightly against his rough palm. It was not forceful. It was gentle. An invitation, not a demand. Daniel's breath caught. He could feel the sincerity in her touch, the weight of her emotions. She was not begging from weakness. She was offering from strength. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something stir inside him, a warmth that went beyond duty, beyond kindness. Something dangerous, yet beautiful. He did not answer her that night. He could not. His mind was a storm of questions, doubts, and desires. But as he lay down to sleep, Lyra curled against him, and her mother's eyes watching from the shadows, one thought echoed in his chest. This was no longer just about saving a child. This was about destiny pulling him toward a future he never imagined. And deep down, he feared and hoped that he might not resist it. The night was cool, and the stars stretched endlessly above the quiet village. Daniel sat near the edge of the fire pit, staring at the flames. The crackle of burning wood echoed in the silence, but his mind was far louder. He thought of Lyra, sleeping peacefully inside her mother's hut. He thought of the strange creatures in the desert, their red eyes burning in his memory. And most of all, he thought of her mother, the woman whose eyes followed him like shadows. Daniel had not come here seeking family or love. He had only wanted to help a lost child, yet fate had tied his life to theirs in ways he could not understand. The soft sound of footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. He turned and saw her walking toward him. Her long hair flowed gently in the night breeze, and her face glowed faintly in the firelight. She carried no words of caution, no signs of fear, only a quiet strength in her steps. She sat down across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. The air was thick with silence, filled only by the fire's breath. Then she lifted her hand and touched her chest. "Lyra," she whispered, pointing toward the hut where her daughter slept. Daniel nodded. "She's safe." The woman's eyes softened. Then she pointed to herself, then to him. Her hand lingered over her heart, her gaze steady and unbroken. Daniel's breath caught in his chest. He had seen this gesture before, but tonight it felt different, heavier, deeper. He shook, his head slightly unsure. "I don't understand." But he did. Part of him already knew what she was asking. Her voice trembled as she spoke again. A flow of words Daniel could not fully grasp, yet her tone carried meaning stronger than language. She was not only thanking him. She was not only admiring him. She was offering something far greater. Daniel stared at her, unable to move. His heart pounded. She wanted him to stay. She wanted him to be more than just a savior. She wanted him to be her partner, her husband. The thoughts slammed into him like thunder. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "No, this can't." His voice faded. The weight of her request was too heavy. The woman leaned closer, her hand brushing gently against his. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her voice was steady. She was not begging out of weakness. She was asking with courage, with a heart open and unafraid. "Why me?" Daniel whispered. He had nothing to offer her. He was a wanderer, a man with no home, no promise of wealth or safety. Yet here was a woman, strong and beautiful, asking him to stay by her side, to become part of her family. She answered not with words, but with action. She placed her hand over his heart. Her touch was warm, steady, full of trust. Then she pointed toward the hut again, where Lyra slept. Daniel's throat tightened. He understood. Lyra had spoken of him. She had told her mother about the stranger, who carried her through the night, who fought against shadows, who gave her food when she was hungry and safety when she was afraid. To Lyra, he was more than a rescuer. He was a protector. And to her mother, that was everything. The fire cracked, loudly sending sparks into the night. Daniel looked into her eyes and saw no doubt, only truth, only hope. His chest burned with conflict. Part of him wanted to run, to escape the weight of this moment. Another part of him wanted to accept, to step into a future that was terrifying but strangely beautiful. He stood suddenly, pacing near the fire. "I can't," he muttered. I don't belong here. Huh, I don't belong to anyone. But when he turned back, she was still there, her eyes never leaving his. And in those eyes, Daniel saw something that broke through his fear. Not just love. Not just desire. But faith. She believed in him more than he believed in himself. Slowly, he sank back down, his body trembling with emotion. The woman reached out again, her fingers intertwining with his. The firelight danced across their hands, making the moment feel almost sacred. He wanted to speak, to give her an answer, but the words caught in his throat. His heart was too heavy, too full. Instead, he lowered his gaze, letting silence carry what he could not say. The woman leaned forward, her forehead resting briefly against his. It was not a kiss, not yet. It was a promise of something greater. Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Not as a wanderer, not as a stranger, but as a man who mattered. The night stretched on, and the stars above shimmered brighter. Daniel knew this moment would change everything. He had walked into this village as a rescuer, but now he was being asked to stay as a husband, a father, a protector, and though fear still twisted inside him, another feeling grew stronger, hope. The night after the proposal was long. Daniel lay awake on the floor of the small hut the villagers had given him. The fire outside had burned low, and the village was quiet. Yet inside his chest, his thoughts roared like a storm. He turned on his side and looked through the open doorway. The stars hung heavy in the sky, silent witnesses to his struggle. He thought of the woman's eyes full of courage, full of hope, and her hand resting gently over his heart. He thought of Lyra, sleeping with her soft glow like a night lamp that never faded. He whispered to himself, "Why me?" He had never believed himself worthy of such things. He was just a traveler, a man moving from place to place with no roots. He had no riches, no home, no promises. Yet here he was, offered something he had never even dreamed of: family. Love, belonging, the memory of the desert returned to him. The red eyes, the shadows watching, the growls in the dark. He had faced them, not for himself, but for a child who needed him. And in that moment, he realized something simple but powerful. He had already chosen his path. When he picked up Lyra in his arms and whispered, "You are safe," he had made a promise that was bigger than fear. The morning came, with golden light pouring across the village. Daniel stepped outside, his face heavy with decision. The villagers greeted him warmly, bowing their heads as he passed. They already saw him as something more than a stranger. And when he looked up, he saw Lyra running toward him, her arms wide open. She jumped into his embrace, glowing brighter than before. "Daniel," she said in her soft, broken voice. The sound shook him. It was the first time she had spoken his name. His chest tightened as he hugged her close. Her mother walked behind, her steps slow but steady. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes locked on him. No words were spoken. None were needed. Her expression carried the same request she had given the night before, but this time Daniel did not look away. He set Lyra down gently, then faced the woman. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding like a drum. "I am not a man of many things," he said slowly, though he knew she might not understand his language. "I have no home, no land, no treasures. But I have this." He placed his hand over his chest. "I have my word, and when I give it, I never break it." The woman tilted her head, listening carefully. Daniel took a step closer. "If you ask me to stay, I will. If you ask me to protect you both, I will. And if you ask me to be more than just a rescuer," he paused, swallowing the weight of his words, "then yes, I will." For a heartbeat, silence ruled. Then her eyes filled with tears, but they were not of sadness. They were of joy. She stepped forward quickly, taking his hands in hers. Her grip was warm, steady, full of certainty. Lyra laughed and clapped, her glow bursting like sunlight, filling the space around them. The villagers who had gathered nearby began to cheer softly, their voices rising like music. They had seen. Enough. The decision had been made. Daniel felt the weight lift from his chest. For the first time in years, he did not feel like a wanderer. He felt like a man with purpose. He felt like he belonged. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel stayed in. The village? He worked with the men, carried wood, hunted for food, and guarded the walls at night. But more than that, he became part of Lyra's world. He taught her games, lifted her onto his shoulders, and laughed as her glow lit the paths like a lantern. Her mother stood beside him through it all, her admiration turning into something deeper love. That grew quietly but firmly, like roots beneath the soil. Daniel did not need to hear the words to feel it. It was in the way she looked at him, the way her hand rested on his arm, the way she smiled when she saw him with Lyra. One evening, as the sun sank behind the dunes, Daniel stood at the edge of the village. He looked out at the desert, where shadows still lurked, waiting. But he was not afraid anymore, because he knew he was no longer alone. He had faced the darkness. Not with power, not with wealth, but with something far stronger: human kindness. And it was that kindness, simple and small, that had given him everything he thought he could never have. As the stars appeared above, Daniel whispered to himself, "This is my place now. This is my family." And deep inside, he knew the truth. Sometimes it is not the great warriors or the powerful leaders who change the world. Sometimes it is the simple human who chooses to help, who reaches out a hand in the dark, and in doing so, becomes more than a hero. He becomes part of destiny.